Today on the Military Mindset for Business podcast, we're talking about rum. Now, if you're like me, you might have a bit of a love-hate relationship with rum, whether it be those early days as a late teenager at agricultural college, or whether it's, mixing Bundy and Coke. Well, today we're talking to Sally Carter, who's the co-founder of Birds of Isle Bunyana Rum. Now, this is not your standard rum and Coke kind of drink. Right, this is a boutique product. They're the first ones in the world that have bought smoke using Australian native bunya nuts. And they're really changing the perception about how we drink rum in Australia. And the product is just amazing. So Birds of Isle, let's have a chat to Sally Carter. Welcome to the Military Mindset for Business podcast, the podcast for the veteran business community. And today I'm chatting to Sally Carter from Birds of Isle. How are you going, Sal?
Hi, Pete. Great to be on here. Thank you for having me today.
Fantastic. Now, Sal and I go a little way back, probably, it's going to sound a bit scary, but maybe 15 years back from crossing paths, in the military. And I sort of felt like I tagged behind you a couple of years in your career. So whereabouts in the world are you today?
I am up in the sunny northern rivers of New South Wales. I'm currently in the little beautiful town of Murwillumbah.
I spent probably 4 years on the Northern Rivers between about 22 and 26, living in little villages like Wardell and Alstonville, and I used to sell cut flowers at the local Byron and Bangalow and Shannon markets like a lifetime ago. It was definitely a lifetime ago. What took you up that way?
Look, Pete, you're exactly right. It's fabulous, and the local markets still are thriving in the region. So if you ever want to come back up and sell flowers, there is definitely still a space for it. I moved up to the region a little over 8 years ago. It is a little bit of a funny story. My partner and I were working corporate roles in Sydney, and we'd kind of set the pipe dream that somewhere in the future we'd love to live between Byron Bay and Noosa is where we selected, as we thought a wonderful part of the world, and eventually start our own business. I think it was probably 3 months after having that conversation, I saw a role come up in Byron Bay that perfectly met my skill set, and I went, amazing. If we ever move, there is jobs for me in the region.
Yep.
Because we had a future track to get out of Sydney. It wasn't immediate. However, the role was so good that I thought I would throw my hat in the ring and just see what it was all about. And I was very lucky to actually be accepted to take the role for a family business, a really thriving family business in the region. And that's what kind of had us shift up here, and we haven't looked back.
Well, it's like the old saying, be careful what you wish for. Sometimes you get it. So, hey, whereabouts did you grow up?
So I grew up in northwestern New South Wales in the town of Gunnedah. My dad was a stock and station agent, and so he'd kind of travelled all through New South Wales. And mum and dad landed in Gunnedah as the right town to kind of have. Dad had his own business there, and that's where I went to primary school, high school, and headed out at the ripe old age of 18 before I went north to Brisbane.
Now, Gunnedah, were you in town or on a farm?
I was in town.
In town? What was it like? I've spent a lot of my life before the military. So I didn't join the army till I was 30, and I spent most of my life between 18 and 30 working on farms and gardens. What was what was it like for you growing up in small town Australia?
Fantastic. If I had my time again, I would definitely grow up in a small town. I think it really worked to my passions. I'm a sporty kid. I love doing all different sports. You can certainly do that in a small town, easier to get around between sports. It just meant the travel, though, on weekends for carnivals and tournaments was a little bit longer. But definitely the sports environment in Gunnedah is fabulous. And so I was lucky to have a family that supported that. It really was fantastic. It's the perfect mix. It's the right size. The town's still roughly around the same size. So roughly 10,000 people, good agricultural background there. There's also mining in the area, and not too far. I think, to get to Sydney's just under 6 hours, so it's not that far really.
Well, the thing I loved about living in small towns wherever I was, so I did like fruit picking and just vagabond job here, job there. No matter what small town I went to, whether it be like Wardell, a town of maybe 800 people, or Gayndah in middle of Queensland, which may have had a couple of thousand, you could just walk into the local pub and just basically say to someone there, like, anyone looking for some work around here? And I used to be able to get a job within 2 days of any single town I went to. But
Yeah.
hard yakka, laboring and doing any kind of thing. But hey, so what ended you up? How did you end up in the army?
In the army. Okay, good question. I no direct family in the military.
Yep.
If you go back a couple of generations, my mum's uncles were around the World War II era, but nothing directly in the immediate family. Oh, sorry, I did have a cousin in the Navy. I when I finished high school, as much as it was fun growing up in a small town, I very much wanted to explore the world and see what was out there. So I headed off to university in Queensland, and I was combining some study with also some sporting pursuits that I had at the
Yep.
time. And Brisbane was the right location for that.
What were you
Um,
playing?
I was actually doing triathlons, so
Oh, yeah.
I was very ridiculously crazy. It's definitely a sport of passion, and a lot of dedication and time. I think I ended up only staying at uni for 18 months. I wasn't certain on the track. I was studying an undergraduate degree in an applied science area that after the first 2 years, you had to decide if you wanted to become a PE teacher or if you wanted to go down the sports science route.
Yep.
I did not want to become a PE teacher. All of my friends in the course did want to become PE teachers. So I was trying to get myself actually across to do physiotherapy. And after 18 months, I think I had the right grades to flick across into physio. But my sporting pursuits were kind of increasing at the same time. So I picked up a scholarship with the Queensland Academy of Sport, which partnered with an Australian triathlon sponsorship that kind of flew me around to events around the country, which was fantastic. So I stopped going to uni, and which probably was a really stupid decision, and travelled around kind of Australia and New Zealand doing triathlons. I went to the trials for the Sydney Olympics, but I was very young at the time, and wasn't successful. And it was kind of around that time, it was 4 years finishing high school. And I was like, hang on a second, I actually need to do something beyond traveling and doing triathlon. I need a career, which is what I'd originally left home for. And it was around the time, it was 2001, and there was a lot in the media around Australia's involvement in the independence of East Timor, Timor-Leste, and there was a lot of positive things that I saw at the time in the media. And so I thought, maybe I'll go and find out what the army's about. And that's what really influenced me. I was living in Brisbane. So I went into recruiting. I looked up some stuff and thought, I think I want to be a medic in the army. Looked up some stuff, went and spoke to recruiting, and then they explained to me that I had no idea that there was different paths you can take in the military. And they kind of explained to me that if I wanted to finish university, there was a path there for me to go and actually pick up my university degree and finish it. And that's kind of what led me to the military. Originally, I thought I wanted to be I went out of medic and went, oh, maybe I could become a doctor. But as you know, none of that happened. And I ended up on the right career path and found my way into RAOC and supply chain, which is kind of where I've sat for a long time.
So direct entry, or did you go through ADFA?
No, I went to ADFA. So wanted to finish off my degree. I could have done like a fast track through ADFA because I already had 18 months of a science degree under my belt. However, I got in and I loved the environment. Like I really enjoyed it. I was like one of the oldest in my year going through ADFA, so a little bit older. I was 22. Met some great people, played rugby. It's where I first came across rugby union. And that stayed through my whole military career. I managed to play rugby union, which was fantastic. And I loved it. And I went, I don't want to just do 18 months. This is the best thing I've seen. I get to study. I get fed every day, which was different from going to university and doing odd jobs here and there. And so ended up doing ADFA, RMC, and then joined RAOC and was in supply chain for the next few years.
And the best thing is just sport, 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 sport.
Oh, mate, honestly, Pete, my last official day in uniform was wearing the Combined Services rugby jersey over in, actually, of all places, it was in Wales. So
Oh, wow.
the final game of a 3-week tour through the UK.
Well, I played defense basketball, and we certainly weren't as gratuitous to get overseas trips for basketball. But I got to admit, combines basketball was one of the best experiences of my life. No ranks, no core, just people that love the game. And, I've got some, lifelong mates out of that little community. It's was such a, literally, it was probably the thing I missed most leaving the army was combined sport.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Certainly, yeah, it was that environment. I think it, stemming from my childhood of loving sport, finding the amazing sporting community in the military, it really was. And you're right. A majority of the friends that I'm in contact with now are all people through my sporting journey. But yeah, it definitely was a big change to kind of lose that, the annual combined services carnival and yeah.
Now, I don't want to embarrass you, but you were good in the army. Like, there's good officers and there's not so good officers, and we're both on either one of those fences. You definitely had a career path that was going places. When did you sort of feel that army was like not really doing it for you?
I think you've been harsh on yourself. I think we're both on the good side, mate.
Mine's a thin veneer though. You got substance.
I loved my time, absolutely loved my time in the military. And I think it was the like-mindedness that comes with sport, really, really, I found also in the military as a whole. 80-90% of people have got the same mindset and goals in what they're wanting to achieve. And that's something that really you don't find that high percentage when you leave the military. But for me, there was things that I was loving. There certainly was a very clear career path outlined for me. If I wanted to take it, I just wasn't. I think I was at a point where I wasn't sure if that was what I wanted to do. I think I was still very young in the military. I think I was early 30s, really a junior rank in mid captain. And I had a wonderful CO at the time who I had some really good conversations with around, I was the adjutant, and I wasn't sure of what my next step was, and I didn't think I wanted to be an OC. So, what did that look like? And it was really hard because that's where the military wanted me to go. They wanted me to go down that leadership path, and I wasn't sure if I really wanted to do that. So with the blessing of my CO, I actually took 6 months off. I took 6 months off. Like, I used my long service leave. I traveled. I went and did what a lot of gap year kids do at 18. I did it in my early 30s for a little bit more money. I still backpacked though. I took 6 months off. I traveled a fair bit. I went and spoke with a lot of people in industry. So military certainly gives you that avenue that I had some connections that I was put in touch with different people across all different industries, different levels, like that had left the military. Some were ex colonels, some were captains that had their own businesses. And I just went and I used that 6 months to network and talk with a lot of different people around avenues for career paths outside of army and what that might look like. At the end of the 6 months, I hadn't found a particular job that I wanted to take. So I went back into the same unit and had some more work with them, but I was still adamant that the right decision for me was to leave. So I'd actually put my resignation in without having a job, but knowing that something would come up. So yeah, it was more that I think I just didn't see the long-term career path for me. So I knew it was the right time to get out and be able to forge my way outside of the military at a young enough age.
Because it is, I always say that the military was the best job I've ever had in my life, like no doubt. Between the friends and the training and the experiences and the sport and the food. I remember joining the army. I think I would have been like 78 kilos, probably at the age of 30, after just coming straight off the farms. I think I left Dundrum at 92 just because of just eating well and doing push-ups like every single day. But there does come a time that a lot of people stick around for the wrong reasons, and I just always sort of looked at you. I was surprised, when you left. I was like, because the army feeds you this carrot of like trying to give you stuff. This, they're always dangling this next thing in front of you. But I was always very admiring of you doing something for you and saying, "No, I'm going to taste a different path." But you're not into business just yet, though, are you? Tell us about your transition. What's your first thing you get into?
Yeah, so I left. One of the conversations I said I had in that 6 months was a gentleman who'd started his own business, and he worked back in recruiting for defence industry.
Yeah.
So his name was James, and so James had his own recruiting business, and it was him and another gentleman. It was two of them are the founders of their own recruiting business. And I was their first hire. So they needed someone to come in who could bridge that gap. So most of the recruiting they were doing was for high-end engineers or people that had the right security clearances to go and work in defence industry jobs. And since
they were veterans, were they?
Beg your pardon?
They were veterans, were they?
No, most were, it was a combination, but a lot of them were technical skilled people who were going to work for your, could be anything, it could be Raytheon,
Yep.
It could have been whatever project was on at the time, they were into those industries. Yeah, so I was a good fit in that I obviously had a defence background. I suppose I was personable, could come and network in defence industry. So I went and started that, and I worked with the boys for 6 months. But again, it wasn't really the right fit. I understand where my skills lie and they don't lie, and I'm not a very hard and fast sales person. And really recruiting is a hard and fast sales role, is the way I see it. And so I did that for 6 months. And again, I left without having another job. So I took the leap of faith. I think there's a bit of a thing here. Didn't have another job, but again, through networking and connections, I think like a week after I put my resignation in, I was having a beer in a pub with a friend who I'd been through ADFA with. But she never went from ADFA to RMC. She left ADFA and went straight into work outside of defence. And basically she just said, give me a resume, sent it across to her HR department. They interviewed me that week and I had a job within a week. And that was in procurement in food manufacturing. So the business was business that everyone would know would be Sun Rice, as in the rice business, but it was the parent company of them, which is called Rice Growers, that has a big umbrella. So they were at the time, I think they were a $1.5 billion business with 2,500 staff. They had 7 businesses under them. And so it was a really, really good starting point to kind of get that transition of having worked supply chain in the military, coming into what a procurement role is, the analytics that sit behind procurement, and really supplier relationship management is kind of where I found my piece. I really enjoy maintaining relationships and working out what the best outcome is for both parties. And that's the kind of role that I followed. So that was my initial part into working in a food manufacturing business in Australia, and kind of it's escalated from there. I see agriculture and food at the heart of what Australia is really great at, and something that I think has a longevity. Even in the current environment, people still need to eat and drink.
Especially when you've got that connection growing up in Gunnedah, stock and station, grazing and pasture, being able to just see this part and the seasons of life going through. I went through Dubbo maybe about 18 months ago. And when Australia has rain, when you're out in the countryside, is the most amazing, beautiful place. When the paddocks are full and the wheat and the sorghum's out there. There was one job that I nearly took when I was living in Emerald in central Queensland, and it was going to be driving a combine harvester from Emerald all the way down to Cootamundra, just following the season down. But the only reason I didn't take that job was I had a dog, and I was like, well, what's the dog going to do for 12 hours a day when I'm in the tractor? So I just love the connection back to back to agriculture there. How much do you think the procurement side of the house related directly to your military supply chain training? Because it's not really a clean match, is it?
It's not a clean match. I did some extra study. So I mentioned I started with science. I didn't finish with a science degree. I finished with an undergraduate arts degree in history. Very useful. But I did some more business studies. Actually, when we worked together in Randwick, I did some postgraduate business study and took business law, procurement, and things then. So I had a little bit of study in the area, but certainly the working out the business needs in a manufacturing environment, I would say there is direct links to military in terms of if you think around the chain of how something needs to get through the different levels in the military. So whether you're supplying, in really simple terms, if working out the right amount of food and water. Let's talk food and water. Yep. So the right amount of food and water supplied to people in the right time, in the right format, is not too dissimilar around working around a business needs in a manufacturing environment of, if I take rice growers, for example, and obviously they're manufacturing and processing rice, and they need packaging to be able to do that. So ensuring that you've got the right amount of packaging in the right format on hand to meet the manufacturing requirements is very, very similar to working out, have you got the right amount of food and water to feed people on the ground in the army. So there was I saw direct transition, and I could see how that worked. And really, the arm of procurement of finding that there's one side of you link between a business and what is supplied. So you'll get there'll be a business want, and really you have to define what the business need is as opposed to the want, and what what currently is in industry that they can supply that meets that need. I think it really does transition directly to kind of working out if you're in ordnance or supply chain in the military, is working out the needs from who you're servicing, and what we've got available to do that.
I love it. It's just the fundamentals of logistics 101, and it's, whereas, all respect to the warfighters, the other 80% of the military, that's all we really do is focus on how to support those people that need it when they need it the most. During this time of corporate life, do you have a sort of an entrepreneurial itch yet? You sort of, one day I'd love to, maybe in a perfect world, or are you content where you are? Like, when does this sort of business seed start to sprout?
Yeah, I think I moved. So I worked for rice growers for almost 2 years. I then wanted to, I was really keen to learn. So I had the itch of not staying in the one spot, which really is it's not dissimilar to the military where you move every couple of years into different roles. So I took a role. I moved out of in a big corporate business in food manufacturing. The New South Wales government did a restructure of their Department of Finance and in their procurement team, and they really wanted to bring people with some corporate exposure in. So I took a role in the New South Wales government, working directly in the Department of Finance in their procurement team. For the first 12 months, I was in an energy portfolio because I'd done some under rice growers. They obviously, but their big manufacturing sites use a lot of electricity. So I'd been involved in negotiating long-term electricity contracts at a large value. So I brought some experience into the state government around how we could work electricity contracts. And I did that for 12 months, but I really wasn't fulfilled. It was I had a lot more to give. So then I transitioned. There was another team, and I took a different role in a team that was like a consulting role, and it was headed up by some ex consultants that they brought in, where we went around to different departments, setting up the procurement framework for that department so that they could be certified to ensure that they had the right framework and staff available to undertake their own procurement instead of it being centrally done by the Department of Finance. And I did that for a few more months. But the itch was there that there was something else I wanted to do. And so that was around the same time that my partner Chanel and I were chatting around what the future may look like down the track. And at the time, Chanel was working for Qantas in a role that sat in the international airline division of customer experience. And in that role, she'd worked on a partnership between Qantas, Four Pillars Gin, and the Rockpool Restaurant Group. And that was, I think, 2014, right at the start of the boom of the gin industry. And Four Pillars really were the leader for that in Australia. And Chanel went down to the Yarra Valley as they were essentially making this gin, and they were telling the story of it. And she came home from it and said, I've just had the most amazing week. This is what happened. I'd obviously already worked in food and was really interested to get back into food manufacturing. And we kind of set the pipe dream there that one day we would love to have our own distillery. And so that started 2014, the dream. And the dream, we went, where should we have the distillery? And we went, we want to be in a great location. So that was the Byron Bay to Noosa in this region. We saw it was a point of difference from what was happening down in Victoria or Tasmania. And so the itch happened there. Yeah.
And I love this, the excitement that just comes from, that entrepreneurial scratch now, like in terms of, as much as selling electricity and writing contracts, with the New South Wales government is somewhat, exciting for those doing it. The ability to be able to create and build something from scratch. So tell us about Birds of Isle.
Yeah, well, thanks. Good leading, Pete. Birds of Isle is Chanel and I's business. It is we're a rum distillery, essentially. We're right in the startup stages. The business concept is just over 4 years old, but our first product in market was around 18 months ago. So for us, the focus is on bringing high quality rum to the Australian market. We've got this amazing industry right in the middle of where we live of sugarcane and sugar producing. Interestingly, Australia is the 4th largest exporter of sugar in the world. Sugar is our 2nd largest export crop after wheat. And bubbling underneath that is this byproduct that you can take and convert into something delicious. So we saw that there was an avenue available to create something new. A lot of people in Australia have a single relationship with rum. Like it's one of those really, really interesting markets where you ask someone about a product, but they name a brand, and it doesn't happen that often. So that's a really interesting relationship that we saw there was an opportunity to potentially overcome that. So, in Australia, it is synonymous with rum and Coke is Bundaberg, but there's this whole world outside of Bundaberg, and that's what we're there to do, to introduce people to new flavors, see rum in a way that they've never seen it before. And hence we started our little distillery in the heart of the northern New South Wales sugarcane growing region.
Well, I went to agricultural college, a couple of lifetimes ago, and rum and Coke was literally the only thing you drank there. And if you played rugby and you drank rum, that was like, a solid pathway to social success. So what's really interesting though is we've had these other, like whiskey and scotch has always had the boutique, one or two. We drink those drinks straight, not necessarily as mixers all the time. Gin is starting to get there now with you having this more boutique, not just diluting it with Coke, but Bundy started because of the sugar around up there. Murwillumbah, it is the start of from probably what, just maybe 80, 100 kilometers south, that's where the sugar starts. And I've got to ask, do they still burn sugar up there? When I lived at Wardell, little town surrounded by sugar fields, there was nothing more I felt iconically Australian than watching the sugar burn.
They still do in our region. So 5% of Australia's sugar is grown in New South Wales. The other 95% is up in Queensland. The amazing thing that I love is so our region has got three mills and a refinery in that 5% of Australian sugar, and it's Australian owned. So it's partially owned by the growers. So 50% of Sunshine Sugar is owned by the growers, and the other 50% is owned by the Manildra Group. That's a privately owned New South Wales business as well. But yes, they do still. It's great. It lets you know you're in harvest season when you see the as it's affectionately known, the black snow. But yes, they still burn cane.
But I remember just as I was leaving Wardell, they started, a little bit of a tangent, but they started working out how to harvest the sugar green and then basically burn it at the mill for energy production. So I'm not sure whether that iconic burning of the sugar will be around forever, or whether they'll learn how to create these energy, because there's so much energy goes up into the sky. But anyway, enough of that tangent. Birds of Isle, what's different about the boutique space? How are you breaking down the boundaries between teaching people what quality rum is rather than just getting 6-pack of Bundy off the supermarket shelf?
Yeah, look, I think that teaching piece is really interesting. It's interesting that you say that. Like it's for us, how do we introduce people to our product? So we've got a hypothesis. We have an hypothesis around what we think will be successful and why it will be successful. How do we test that hypothesis? How do we get on the ground and tell people without having a big budget? Like that's a challenge. But we do that. Really having that direct to consumer feedback. I'm in a bottle shop every Friday night. Every Friday night, somewhere could be in Sydney.
Standing there, like giving samples?
Yep. Giving samples, chatting to customers. So it's something I think no matter how big the business gets, I will continue to do that. It is invaluable directly talking to customers. It gives me an avenue to test key messaging. It gives me an avenue to try drink serves. So how do we do it and show it's in a different way? I always serve it as a cocktail. If someone would like to try the product neat, they can. But to be frank, statistically, if you were chatting before about whiskey, and globally, the amount of whiskey that's actually drunk as a neat serve, the statistics is it's less than 15% of people drink their whiskey neat. Most people still drink it in a format that has some form of mixer or cocktail. So I do that every Friday night. I mix up a cocktail, show people an amazing way that they can do it, something they can do at home. It's pretty easy to be able to have friends over, make a classic daiquiri. So at the moment, I'm on the classic daiquiri train. I can show people how to do that. I give them information in store around, they've got a little takeaway they can take that shows them how to make a daiquiri. And really, I talk about that rum can be seen in a different way than what it's been done in the past. And I think, really, to be honest, us being females as well. So we only do aged rum. Which is a dark rum. There's a lot of perception behind, if you think of the marketing or even the early days of advertising around whiskies or around rum, traditionally you'll see, might be, if it's a whiskey or a scotch, it might be a man sitting in a leather couch,
Yeah.
with a cigar.
I'm
And
thinking
so,
Mad Men. What's it? The guy's name out of Mad Men, the TV
yeah,
show. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think, there's scope there to redefine that, to be able to say, why can't other parts of society enjoy wonderful quality spirits in a similar way?
So how did you get your first sales on this stuff? Because it's a bit of a gutsy move to get out and just start a distillery. Like, where did this ideation of thinking like literally we're going to crack on and start making this product? Where did that
Yeah.
come from?
Yeah, so we originally did a lot of research. So Chanel's background is in marketing. And so that market analysis and checking, do we actually have a great idea, and is there potentially an opportunity in the market? Chanel spent the first 6 months trawling through every bit of international data that we could get our hands on,
Mm.
looking at what currently sits in market, where's the trend in terms of product sales, where do they sit in Australia, where do they sit globally, what price points are they at, what has been premiumized, what has not yet been premiumized. So really we started with that to go, what do we think our product's going to be? And we had multiple iterations of product before we even got to that minimal viable product. And they were like, you could call them desktop. So desktop analysis around flavor profile, how old's the product going to be, what format are we going to sell it in? So we did that, combined with increasing our knowledge and education. So we both went and studied international courses around spirit appreciation, tasting, how are they made, what's in the market, to enable us to be able to talk about it. So neither of us came from a drinks or beverages
Yep.
background. Chanel at least had some hospitality background. I had zero. I have
Yeah.
never worked. Even my junior jobs were never in hospitality. I'd never done waitressing. I'd never done bar work. Chanel, thank God, had. But we had to upskill ourselves. So we did a fair bit of work upskilling ourselves, and we went out and market and spoke to people. So even before we formally registered the business, and this was in the middle of COVID, Chanel got on the phone and called. We literally did. In the test and learn and testing your hypothesis, there's a series we watched around. I need to remember the acronym. It's called YODA, which is your own. God, let me come back to it. Hopefully, it jumps into my head. But it's really it's testing a theory, and how can you test your own theory? And so we had to work out a way for us to do that with zero budget and the business not
Yeah.
starting. And so Chanel decided she'd pick up the phone, and we had a list of 500 venues all around Australia. And Chanel rang them, or if she was able to get to them. So Brisbane, at the time, the border was still open between Brisbane and New South Wales. So she literally went and knocked on doors in bars and spoke about what our idea was, and do we think it would be of interest. And so we literally did
Yeah.
that before we even registered the business.
This is super interesting. And a lot of people don't, probably see this fundamental groundwork that goes into MVP. Is this the right thing to do? Like there's some people out there, they'll have 1,000 ideas a day. Now, like, the ideas are easy to come. Execution and is this the right thing to actually do is, a totally different story. And when you're really looking at, preserving your time and your resources into what you should actually, literally invest your time into, it's how long did you think that period took before because you're both still working on the side, I imagine?
I was.
Yep.
So we went through a few different business iterations before the
Yep.
distillery while we're up here. So at one stage we thought we were going to open an ethical butcher. So our little local town, the local butcher had closed. And so we saw scope to put a new butcher shop in. So we did some research in that first. Chanel ended up leaving her corporate role that was worth a lot of money, and went and worked for $25 an hour at the local butcher.
Yep.
She worked there for 18 months, which was great. really, really fabulous insight. And we worked out we do not want to open our own retail shop. So it was
Tough
really
gig.
great.
Tough gig. My parents were butchers. It's early starts and late finishes every day.
Yeah, it really wasn't for us. We both had the idea of being able to build a scalable business beyond we didn't want to do, we both came from reasonably big corporate roles that we saw that there was an avenue for us to do something that had scale beyond Australia, that we could grow a business and grow a brand that we could take internationally. So we came back to that. So we did try that. So that I was working the whole time in the role that I took up here. Chanel worked at the butcher and was doing some of this stuff while she was working at the butcher. And then we went, actually, to make it work, we have to take the risk and step into it. And so Chanel went full time in the business, just without getting paid full time in the business. And she did that for the first 2 years. And then I came in at the 2-year mark, and left my role and went, because there was more and more work happening that we knew we either needed to hire somebody to come in, or I couldn't maintain the amount of work that I had in my paid job, and the stress that comes with that, alongside the amount of work I needed to do in the business. Yeah. So we went, you know what, if we're actually going to make this thing successful, you have to take away those distractions. So honestly, my advice is, if you're dabbling and trying to do two things at once, you're probably not going to do either of them successfully. And so we really strongly believed that in order to make it work, we both needed to give 100% to the business.
You're either in it or you're not. Now, when do you come to the point of this, the bunya pine piece? Because that's really, for me, a real, like, it's one thing to have a quality boutique, product in your rum, but the bunya nut for me is a little bit of an X factor.
Yeah, you're right. Look, we're the first in market to do it in rum. It's unusual to do it in rum, but for us, it was really, we needed to find a connection, something that was different and a real connection to our region. So we worked with a local Indigenous chef. We got advice around ingredients, what ingredients are good to use, how do we use them, what's the right way to use them, can we use them in alcohol? Is it something that's fine culturally to use in alcohol? And the bunya nut, just flavor profile, it works so well. So in terms of, bringing a really quality high-end spirit, we needed to add something that matched that. And the really for us, I looked at just using the bunya nut on its own. But Mindy, that's who we worked with. Mindy was like, let's not waste parts of it. You can actually, the husk around the kernel can be used as well. It's got these wonderful aromas of like pine wood coming from the pine tree. And so we actually smoke those, or we don't smoke, we char them and flame torch them, which brings this level of smoke. So you always think about smoke associated with whiskey, or if you've ever had a mezcal that has this, the difference between a peat smoke and the smoke that comes from when they make mezcal, a traditionally way of making it is that you heat the pinot, which is the center part of the agave plant, under this fire stone, and it brings this wonderful level of smoke to the product. And so we saw an opportunity to bring something that's native to Australia, adds an amazing flavor, and brings smoke to rum in a way that you never thought you could do it. And for us, it really closed the piece of us using, so we use a blended rum for this first release. And what I mean by that is we blend 5 different age rums together that are in the style that we wanted, which is a light and dry style of rum. If you think of the wine world as the easy way to talk about it, if I go red wines and you go a Pinot Noir, which is a really light and appealing, that's the style of rum that we're making. Whereas there's different styles of rum that I would say are more like big and bold. So a Bundaberg rum is more in your Shiraz, it's big and it's bold. Whereas what we're doing is a particular production technique of distillation that provides a light and dry flavour. Now, we couldn't find any aged rum in Australia that's made like that. So if I couldn't find it locally, whilst the product we've distilled is aging, so that I had something to actually sell that's an aged rum, I thought I'd go to the best quality I could find. And so I've got a blend of 5 different aged rums that are out of Venezuela. And then we continue to age those. So we brought those into Australia, and then we continue to age them in a muscat cask that's come from the Barossa Valley, which adds another level of depth to the product. Also another link to something that's Australian and something that's really in the heart. Like muscat is probably my most favourite fortified. So if you talk about rum has an interesting reputation in Australia, I'm pretty sure muscat does as well. And then the last thing we do is that bringing in the really hyper local focus of the bunya pines literally grow 100 meters from the distillery, and so we bring those in as the last part of the process.
Now, if I'm just put my old ex-horticulturalist hat on, everyone probably recognizes the Norfolk Island pines that are long. They're pretty iconic in, like Manly Beach and place like that. A bunya pine is the same family as the Norfolk Island pine, but the branches droop down, whereas the Norfolk Island pine, they sort of sit flat or horizontal. The bunyias are beautiful drooping, but they drop these massive cones like that come out. I just love the way that already we can see not only the quality but the craft that's gone into the product, and and how you are looking to make something that is like, I'm not knocking Bundy or any of those other products, but they're different products for different people for different reasons. And just the way you've even been describing this, with the smoking it with bunya pine and what's it called, curing them in the barrels, in the muscat barrels?
Yeah, we finish them. So the product is technically, so in Australia, to call something rum, globally, rum has to be made from sugarcane. So it can be made from the fresh juice when you first press the cane, could be made from that. That style is synonymous with a region, the French Caribbean region. So that's a different style of rum. It could be made from when they refine sugar at different stages of boiling the liquid. You get the byproduct. You get a honey first, which is another really sweet product, and the last part of the process, which is a byproduct of sugar refining, is molasses. So rum needs to be made from sugarcane, and then the last part in Australia, the law is it needs to be aged in wood for 2 years. So we take a product that legally is already rum, so it's aged between 2 to 8 years of age, and then to add like a different depth and level of flavor, we then take that combined product and we mature it for further 6 to 12 months in a ex-muscat cask. Yeah.
Got it. Now, your journey into this path, obviously bootstrapping or self-funding it, to create a product that has the volume or the scale that you need it to do, you need it to actually reach its full potential. You've gone down a pathway of capital raising. Do you want to share with us a little bit about the steps that you took and why you've gone down this path to promote and build your brand?
Yeah, so we bootstrapped for the first couple of years. You're right, it's a very capital intensive industry. Certainly from even the product that we've got in market now, that's still a minimum 12 to 18 month process from getting that liquid to being able to sell it. So you've got a really long lead time to be able to manage your cash flow. So for us to be able to grow the business beyond doing something really, really small scale, we knew we needed to bring more capital into the business until we hit a scale where it really is cash flow positive and turning a profit. So over the last 12 months, we've been looking at different avenues to be able to bring capital into the business. You've obviously got a different balance between debt and equity financing. For us at the size we are at the moment, debt financing is really, really difficult. So we don't have access to good debt financing unless it's an equipment financing. You can get that as a startup, but certainly we can't get a level of debt financing until you've got more runs on the board. So we knew we had to go down the equity financing route. But we want to do it in a scalable sense where we're not losing too much of the business ourselves. And so really the challenge is certainly in the market to have, I would still call us, even though we've got a product in market, we really are a startup business and we're kind of pre-revenue because we've got minimum amount of revenue coming in. It's a really high risk investment, and the going down the private path of either speaking to high net worth individuals or speaking to family offices, we don't hit that requirement. Most of them look at a check size of $2+ million. And so for them, the risk is too high, and our business isn't valued high enough that they would take too much of the business and they would be a significant lead investor. It's not appealing to that market. So we certainly researched that market to see if we could find something in that path. But what we've actually ended up with and led to, and it works really well for consumer packaged goods. So consumer packaged goods, really it's an interesting market because it's a different scale to something that's IT related. So we've gone down the crowdfunding route. It's been legal in Australia for just over 6 years. And what it really enables, it enables a everyday public to be able to invest in a private business. So that wasn't around prior to that. Obviously, you could have friends and family, or if you knew someone that was starting a business, you could come in and be a shareholder. But what the equity crowdfunding is, it enabled you to reach a whole heap of consumers or customers that are wanting to have a part of the business and believing in your idea. So for us, it gives us two things. It's another validation point that people are interested in the concept and what our idea is, and they want to be part of that. And two, it brings capital into the business.
The other interesting thing as well is I was actually quite surprised because looking at the documents about all the crowdfunding myself, is that you can actually get in on quite a small parcel. Now, I think it was $250 was the minimum investment for share. I was surprised that there was literally that kind of entry level. Now, there's obviously you can go as high as you want, and there's different rules once you hit wholesale and retail investing, etc. But that's all part of the fine print. But there is that ability to be able to get people who believe in the product, to dip their toe in the water and be a part of the future of the business.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Pete. And we can choose the minimum we set.
Yep.
But for us, 250 was good. For us, that's essentially 2 bottles of our product. So it's a small investment, but it enables people to be part of the company and that they see a future in it. It's a really, really, it was interesting exploring it, and it's interesting. So we're in the middle of we're almost towards the end. We've got a couple of days left of our crowdfunding campaign. And it's great. It gives you another avenue to chat. So certainly sophisticated investors, as you were saying, they can come in under crowdfunding. We can have a wholesale investor. So that's someone who, legally it's someone who's is investing more than $10,000. But there's certainly some really good protections and instruments in place there for this level of funding or investment. It's just a different style for businesses who are looking to bring in equity.
I was actually also surprised not only how accessible the entry point is, but how simple the information is presented across during the crowdfunding process. How did you end up choosing the right partner or the right agent to go with from the crowdfunding, and what were some of the considerations that you went through?
Yeah, we looked at there's a couple of different platforms in Australia that hold the right financial licensing to be able to do a crowdfunding. And so we actually had some direct introductions. So there was a couple of people that we were chatting to, a few different VCs that we were talking to about financing that kind of pushed us down this path, and they made some recommendations to a few of the businesses. So we took on board recommendations. We looked at the portfolio that they've been investing under. So where have they had success? What type of businesses do they currently have on their platform? What support can they provide? So are they purely just the platform, or can they provide marketing support during the campaign? So our business is just myself and my partner. So to be able to continue the business running whilst undertaking a capital raise is a big thing. So we knew we needed that external support there. And is that something that they could link us to? And then how do they make money? What's the instrument for them in terms of their success rate, and what does that look like?
Yeah, look, well, for me, for one, I'm someone who's on a small little amount, but I'm keen as to see where the future of the business goes. I'm really interested in this, like, all roads lead to Rome kind of thing, in terms of where life takes you to be at a certain point of your life. Like, not only where growing up in Canada, having that military career, which gave you the foundations of logistics training, back into agriculture, big corporate, supply chain, procurement, has led you to this point now where the two of you have got this, exciting product out there. I guess as we get to a wrap, have you got a certain, any lessons that you'd like to share with other people, whether you're either in the military right now, looking to basically transition out, or, a lot of people, like Sal did, transition into other jobs and careers before they get into the business path. Over to you, Sal. What do you want to share with us before we head up?
Yeah, I think really on the business path, like for me, the roller coaster is real, and the emotional roller coaster is real. So I think you kind of need to be prepared to strap yourself in for that. And I think no one really, I certainly know I really didn't understand before starting the business, or I'd even say in the first couple of years of business, the length of the emotional toll that it takes. So you need to be prepared. Like there's a risk taking in starting your own business. There's an inherent risk with that, but there's continued decisions that you need to make along the way that really does, you need to give that commitment. So it's a commitment in time. And it certainly can come at the expense of relationships. It can come at the expense of not being able to socialize with friends as much. So I think you just need to really be prepared for that, and understand that, success comes at a cost. But with that, you need to be able to, have some sounding boards. Make sure you've got good people around you that you can really talk to about that, because it really can be lonely. 100% can be lonely. So for me, the first thing is it is really a roller coaster. Find yourself a couple of mates or a couple of mentors that you can talk to kind of share that burden with, because can be quite lonely. The other things, like, I think we spoke quickly around the testing and learning. Set yourself up an effective way to be able to test and learn in a way with small levels of cash flow. I spoke to you before, really interesting. It takes me back to really early days in my military learning, where they spoke about, this decision-making process of an OODA loop, which I think it dates back to the US Air Force, where you observe, you orient, you decide, and you act. And it's really the person that can make a decision the quickest that wins. Well, I think that's directly transferable to business, and around how you test and learn what your product or service is and how you can do that in an effective way. And for us, it's really me on the ground in bottle shops. I'm testing and learning our messaging. I'm testing and learning to serve.
And the way you've bracketed this concept from, like, being in the Qantas, like, hey, this new 4 pillars has come out, I'd love to do something like that. That is just about as broad as a concept you can get, through to the back end research and the hours of slog, actually trying to understand what the product and market fit is, to finally we've got this beautiful product sitting here. But no, keep going. I'm super excited.
You're right. The product market fit, it takes time, Pete.
Yeah.
We're still learning. Like we honestly, like our messaging for how we communicate that to people, we are still refining. And because you kind of get success along the way. And talking about success around goal setting. So we talk about, setting SMART goals. We talk about how we track them. For me, it was like the light bulb moment came where I got introduced to a model called the 4 disciplines of execution.
Yeah. Yep.
4DX. And it's really an execution model of goal setting. So it's where you set a wildly important goal, and that wildly important goal is something that what they call a lag measure. It directly tells you about results. So for us, a really simple example would be increase our repeat purchases in our retail channel from 40% to 55% repeat purchases by the 1st of September 25. So you set it as a SMART goal. It's something that's result driven, but then the tracking of it, and this is what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. And you can set those goals all the way down through a hierarchy of goals that link to your overarching business strategy. But the key thing is the lead measure. What are the things that you are actually doing on a day-to-day basis that are going to achieve that end goal? So if I talk about us wanting to grow repeat sales in our retail businesses over a certain period of time, what can I do on a weekly basis that's going to actually impact and get me that result? So if I set 2 lead measures that I'm going to track weekly, one of them is for every sales visit, learn 2 facts about the people you meet.
Yep. The one thing
and
I
that's
love
all
here,
about relationship building.
so I'm just going to quickly confirm the 4 disciplines. We've got focus
Yep.
on the wildly important number 1, act on lead measures, which is number 2, keep a compelling scoreboard, number 3, so you can actually track how you're going, and create the cadence of accountability. Now, one of the things about acting on lead measures that I love what you're talking about is too often in business we look at data, which is like a lag measure. Like it's stuff that's looking in the rear view out the back of the car where it's already happened. No, the lead measures are when we're looking into the future and anticipating what can happen. Because if we can, use those levers that have an effect on what's going to happen, rather than just looking at our profit, loss, and balance sheet, which could be in behind, this is where we really get the ability to bracket and maneuver into what that right product market fit is.
100%, Pete.
Yep.
And you're exactly right. And those lead measures, you need to track them exactly like that, having a scoreboard. So we catch up every week and we go, how many sales visits did I do? And did I learn 2 facts? And there's ways you can track that. The other thing is do 3 bottle shop tastings a week. Have I done 3 bottle shop tastings a week? And then you see that it's actually resulting in that conversion. And if they're not, you need to change your lead measures. So talking about testing and learning, there's testing and learning in, do I have my lead measures right? I've set my goal for my lead measures, learning 2 facts about every staff member I meet every time I see them. Amazing. Is that converting into increasing repeat sales? If it's not, maybe you need to go back again. But they're really, really, the model is fabulous because it can be broken down across every level of the business. And that wildly important goal is so critical for what your area of your business, what's going to be the biggest impact to your area. And so setting that's amazing. But look, it really is a good model. And I'd encourage people to get a copy of the book, to, I don't know, listen to it on Audible or something, but it's really fantastic.
It's one of those no-brainers. Like everyone will get something out of it. What's next? I can't wait. I have this penchant for what's called turn left life. I just love the experience of getting on a plane and, just turning left and getting into your little cubicle. And I'd love to see Birds of Isle, in the business class, first class section of, the next airline that would jump on in the future.
Yeah, we'd love to, Pete. We're in that really early stage, as I said, in growth stage. So for us, the next big thing is taking on the Brisbane market. So Brisbane first, Qantas International second.
Well, I am meeting with the head of Qantas procurement next week to talk about all things veteran-owned and getting veteran-owned businesses into his supply chain. So, I'll be sure to drop birds of Isle. Okay, so I think that if you're listening to this and you know a rum drinker in your life, if you see someone sitting there with a black tin of Bundy and Coke, and you want to buy them something that's different, something a bit special, something that they're really going to enjoy, Sal, how can they get a bottle of this Birds of Isle?
Yeah, Pete, look, I think we've got our website. So literally just look at Birds of Isle. You can buy direct from us there. Otherwise, we've got a couple of bottle shops in Brisbane capital city, Sydney, and a few around our region, but really right across Australia, the easiest way. We'll ship to all areas of Australia, flat price shipping. Yep. And I would encourage, even if you think someone doesn't like rum, I would challenge you that our product is something that's completely different, and it might be something that you could be a tequila drinker or you could be a gin drinker, and there's a way to drink Birds of Isle that will give you a new understanding of how amazing rum is.
Maybe if you just like a bit of quality in your life, I like to spoil yourself just a little bit with something that's, super nice. So Birds of Isle at birdsofisle.com.au. We'll have it in the show notes. Sal, you're someone that I always love tracking your adventures. I've always sort of, watched what you've done with, a lot of admiration, whether it be in your military career or your transition across. And now the fact that, this brilliant female-led, veteran-owned, business really pushing the boundaries of a new product that's totally unique in Australia, but really so focused on now that classic connection with, Australian culture as well as the Australian bush. I think it's amazing. So, Sal, thank you for coming and joining me today.
Thanks, Pete. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'm happy, honestly, if any other veteran-owned businesses want to reach out, just drop me a line. I'm happy to chat anytime.
Perfect. And we'll also have Sal's LinkedIn connection and all of that in the show notes as well. So, Sally Carter, thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely day. And I can't wait for this evening and have a little daiquiri.
Sounds great, Pete. Enjoy.
Take care, Sal. Bye.